Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Anna Baral. Welcome to the Ocean Plastic Q&A this Saturday morning. You are going to learn much more about what is this about, and we are going to have presentations in a minute. But just to say very quickly that this is part of the Bio 100A course. Some of the content has been incorporated into week 3 material and also week 2. But this particular presentation here and learning more is going to provide you the opportunity to learn to get some extra credit points. So we are going to give you more information about surveys and focus group opportunities later on today. So, and this will be recorded for those who couldn't attend. So just a few housekeeping details. So we expect a bunch of people, as you say, it's pretty busy. So please keep your microphones off while, if you are not talking. If you have a questions, you can either click on the little icon where it says reactions for your hand up, or you can type in the chat. We will try to be monitoring all these, ways to ask questions. So without further ado, I'm passing it to Dr. Simmons for a little warm-up poll.
Hi, everybody. I know this can be a little bit awkward, so just to get, the conversation started and start this off on a fun tone, we had a little bit of a warm-up poll for you all. So in this particular case, you get to write on the whiteboard, and what we are asking you to write is highly contentious question here. Which city do you think has the best pizza? So in order to write on the whiteboard, you're going to need to click to the right of the green view so-and-so screen to view options, click annotate, and choose T for text. If that's difficult for you to do on a mobile device, feel free to also just write it in chat. We'll be looking at both. See, that is not a city I was expecting, Dallas. Okay.
Actually, I have to agree with New Haven. I went to a pizza place in New Haven, and that was the best pizza ever.
Oh.
I had forgotten that, but I have to agree with, I'm a New York pizza person, but I agree with New Haven.
Is that anywhere near where that Mystic Pizza was filmed? Just a thought. Someone should say LA, San Diego, Detroit. Wow, we got a lot of opinions on this one. I knew we'd get a lot of, opinions on this one, but I'm glad to see you all participating in this.
And now I have one more reason to go to Alaska. This is fun.
I've been to Anchorage, and I don't think I ever had the pizza.
By the way, there are a bunch of very interesting insights also in the chat box. Bakersfield, that's a new one to me.
Mm-hmm.
San Bruno, California, West Palm Beach. Very cool. Well, we should make a little statistical analysis of which one, although I have to say some of the outliers sound the most interesting ones.
It's true. It's true. Well, I did save this, so we have it for posterity, just to see a diversity of opinions and make sure everyone's used to contributing to the conversation, because we do want this to be a conversation and not just throwing information at you. So now that we're used to the tool, we've got a slightly a slightly more serious question to ask you all. Again, low stakes, nothing's going to happen in either way, no matter how you answer this. But we're curious to know, in one word or phrase, how would you describe this month's lab experience? So same deal, just open the tools exact same as before. And let's see what we get.
And by the way, if you have difficulty writing, if you are on a mobile device and it's difficult for you to use the whiteboard, feel free to type it in the chat box. So we have interesting, different, eye-opening, intriguing, educational. Very cool.
Adventurous. Well, that's a fun word. Cool. Well, we like to see that one. Unique. Well, we certainly hope it's not like any other class that you've taken here at NU anyway. A little bit of mixed opinions here. One person typed easy to do, another person typed rigorous. Oh, my seeds aren't germinating.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah. It's that's an issue. That's why we would say try to get your seeds going quickly. So so it takes some days sometimes, and depends on the quality of the seeds also.
We'd like to share you for sharing your thoughts, opinions, etc. About the course. This is just a really great way for us to get a little bit of quick feedback and maybe tailor the presentation a little bit to your desires. And yeah, it's just nice to hear from you. So you've shared a little bit about yourselves. Should we do some very quick introductions, Anna?
Yes, and we are a bunch of us panelists, and in Zoom we don't really know who is who. So I'm going to start with who I'm an A, and then we just go in alphabetical order. And I'm afraid that after me it will be Allison's turn, and we just go in alphabetical order. So the introduction is just to say who you are and what's your affiliation and part of your project, and then in this project, and then we will talk more about what we do. Please remember to mute your microphones. So I'm Anna Barral. I'm a professor at National University, and I am one of the investigators of this Ocean Plastic Grant. Is this passing it to Allison?
Hi, everyone. I'm Allison. I'm a student at National University. I'm in the Clinical Laboratory Science program, and I've been working on the project since 2017 with Dr. Barral. I'll pass it on to Andrea.
I was like, I guess that'll be me next. I'm Andrea. I'm also a student researcher at National University, and I'm also a clinical lab science major. And we can pass it on now to, all my names are all out of alphabetical order, so.
Avishek is the next, I think.
Hi, I'm a postdoctoral researcher at Scripps. I work at Bowman Lab. My research interest is in environmental microbiology and bioinformatics. And apart from that, I love traveling and exploring new places. And I've been a couple of times on the field on Scripps Fair during National University visit in 2019, when things were regular before the pre-COVID period. And I'm happy to join in this curriculum. And the next, I'm not sure, I think Jeff or Jesse.
I think it's Jeff.
Yes.
Okay, I'll go ahead and take it. Hi, everybody. My name is Jeff Bowman. I'm an assistant professor over at Scripps. I've been working with Anna, Rachel, and Amelia on this project for a few years now. And my lab primarily does microbial ecology work. And I look forward to chatting with you all today.
And actually, sorry, we bypassed the E's, Emilia. Sorry, my alphabetical skills are impaired this morning. So sorry, going back to the E.
No problem. Great to meet you all today. My name is Amelia. I am working with both Anna and Jeff on this grant, and it's been a couple of years now. I work in the biotech industry. I'm working at a company called Thermo Fisher Scientific, which is actually the company that probably some of you have become aware of because we provide a lot of the components for the COVID testing. But I have, worked on ocean plastics for over 10 years and trying to understand, what's happening from a microbial level with plastics in our ocean, as well as concentration of plastics. I'm really excited to be here today and meet all of you. I have no idea who's next.
I think I'm after Jeff. So, okay. My name's Jesse Wilson. I'm also a postdoc in Jeff's lab, and I look at microbial time series off the pier, and I've helped out with the National University Plastic Projects a few times, so I'm happy to be back. This is the first online version that I've done. So.
Morning, everyone. I'm Matt. I'm a first-year grad student in Dr. Bowman's lab. My research is on airborne marine microbes, and I do that off of the Scripps Pier at SIO.
Let's just circle back to the K's. We have Kurt and Ken. So it should be Ken first and then Kurt.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ken Derry. I'm a adjunct professor at National University. I teach mostly at nights, and in the daytime, I am a research scientist at UCLA in the Department of Surgery, Liver Transplantation. And my research focuses on developing small therapeutics that activate the immune system to prevent organ rejection after transplantation. I'm very excited to be part of this discussion today and meet all of you. And I would like to just say that one of the places that I enjoy the most is in the summer, I like to kayak out of the La Jolla Cove area there next to the La Jolla Shores Hotel. And often I walk down the beach and I'm right there at that Scripps Pier that was in the video. So it's really exciting to be a part of this. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kurt Stuke. I'm from San Antonio, Texas, or I live in San Antonio now. We have power, so Leah and I are delighted to be here today. We have electricity. Yeah, we just went through some good snowstorms and frozen pipes, and now we have food shortages in San Antonio. But I am the external evaluator for this grant. National Science Foundation funded the grant, and as part of the grant requirements, they have an external evaluator participate. We are going to be holding focus groups later this week and next, and we are inviting you to participate in it, and we'll provide the link to it later in the chat so that you can go and sign up to be as part of the focus group. So hello from San Antonio.
Hi, everyone. I'm Leah. Like Kurt said, I'm on the evaluation team, and we've had a weird week, but we're excited to be here and see some smiling faces, and it's starting to warm up outside, so things are looking up here.
I think that leaves me as the bookend. Yes, Anna? So I'm Rachel Simmons. I'm another professor at National University who works on this grant, and we're super excited to have you all today.
Thank you, everybody, for your introductions. And that link that has been posted in the chat about the Padlet kind of shows what we intend to do today. So we intend to have first a discussion around the project. And we'll get started with something that may be interesting for you, learn about research at National University and the students' experience, and then we can discuss more the project and the whole issue about plastic pollution and research and what can be done about it. And after that, we are going to have a little bit more of a discussion that, and I know that you are mostly non-science major, but how science skills can be useful for your careers. And after that, we have planned some breakout room activities. So the idea is that we will be wrapping up by 11:30. So without further ado, let's get started with the student experience. So I would like to ask Allison and Andrea to very briefly detail how has it been to be a student researcher at National? It has been useful for you and so on. So.
I can go ahead and start. So like I said, I started research at National in 2017. I was actually a nursing major and I had just taken microbiology, and I was brought to the attention that there was research options. And so that led me to meet Dr. Burrell, and I started working on the Ocean Plastics Project. And at first I didn't have a really good idea of microbiology. I had the very basic knowledge, but I learned more as I started getting more involved in the project. It started with basic microbiology lab work, and now I do a lot of the plastic preparation that you would see goes into the small cages before we deploy them. When we get them out of the water, I process them back in the lab. I've done DNA extractions and all different kinds of lab testing. It's been really useful in my coursework because I don't think I would have as good of an idea of what's going on in classes if I didn't have the experience. It's really cool to learn about stuff in the lab with Dr. Burrell and everyone else. And then I take my classes and I kind of feel like I'm a little bit ahead of the game just because I've already been exposed to some of the stuff before I actually see it in class, which is nice.
Okay, well, I'll hop in here next. I'm a new research student, so Allison's been doing it much longer than I have. I just started, technically, I would say in December of last year. I went out for my first collection, which is a lot of fun. I was super excited to really be out there in the field and seeing how science is working in real life. And of course, looking at the divers and everything is very exciting too. I'm excited to be in the lab coming up. I should be in there very soon, and hopefully I'll get all of this handy knowledge like Allison has to use in my future courses coming up as well.
Thank you so much for your insight. And again, if this is something that is of interest for you, we are going to have a breakout room later on if you want to learn more about research opportunities. And just wanted to highlight that you don't have to be like a science or biology student to do research. Dr. Simmons had a student who was a cybersecurity major. Could you tell us a little bit more about what was that student doing with you?
Yeah, so I actually wanted to mention that a lot of the work that Allison and Andrea are doing is direct hands-on manipulation of the experimental pieces and all of that. But research doesn't actually stop once you've processed all of the samples. You still need to analyze that data. And so I actually welcome working with students who have a background in computer science, because we take all of the data, and they're very, very big data sets, but we take all of that data and try to find patterns in them.
And I just want to highlight that if anybody wants to learn more about data science, please join the Scripps breakout room or ask questions to the Scripps scientists, because that's one of the, major forte about what they do. I don't know if you guys want to say anything about big data and data analysis.
Yeah, I think that Jesse and Abhishek in particular could speak to some of our projects. It might be best to save that for the breakout room. So if anybody's really interested in learning about how we use time series analysis for industrial applications, which is a big part of what Abhishek is currently looking at, using hundreds and hundreds of different samples of microbial community structure to identify processes that are of interest and relevance to industry. What Jesse's doing is taking, again, really large data sets, hundreds of samples, and aggregating that data in different ways and looking for key points of change in the microbial community at the Scripps Pier, and trying to understand what that means for the carbon cycle and the nitrogen cycle and some of the other processes that are really important for the health of the coastal ocean. So that's all I'll say on it right now, but join us in the Scripps breakout room and you can hear more about what they're doing, and also more about what Matt is just getting spun up to do in terms of understanding how aerosols and the bacteria that get injected into the air by waves and other processes are important.
Thank you, Jeff. So now we are going to open the floor for any questions that students can have about the project, like the science of the project, or what can be done about plastic pollution and so on. I did receive a couple of questions from students via email before, so to warm up, let me read one of the questions. So somebody said that they live in Florida. My house sits 200 feet from the water. I have seen firsthand the effects of big and small plastic on local waters. I was wondering what the general thought is to adding some type of chemical to plastic that would deter marine life from ingesting it. Like says the same way a bitter agent is added to antifreeze to keep people from using it as a poison. So any of our experts would like to answer that?
So I can take a stab at it, and then I would actually be a little bit curious myself what Amelia's reaction to that idea is, because she kind of works closer to the manufacturing side of those plastics. But that was a really intriguing idea when that question came across. But I think there are a couple of challenges that are useful to think about. So one is that we're using these plastics in a lot of cases to store things. You think about a water bottle that's storing water, and it might sit on the shelf for months or years with that water in it. And so coming up with a compound or a some manufacturing process that is going to put that property on that plastic without that property and then leaching out into whatever is being stored in that bottle is a real engineering and technical challenge. The other challenge is that's more relevant to what we're talking about today is that in a lot of cases, the marine organisms that are consuming this plastic, obviously they're not interested in consuming plastic, but they are interested in consuming other bits of ocean biology. And doesn't take very long for the plastics to sit out there in the marine environment before they are coated in marine biology. They're coated in bacteria and algae and everything else. And so when an organism is tasting bits of the environment and trying to understand whether this is something they want to ingest, that's what they're tasting. They're not tasting the plastic. So it's this process of colonization and sort of camouflaging or masking the harmful plastic inside that leads to this huge accumulation of plastic within marine food webs.
Yeah, so, briefly, as Jeff mentioned, I work actually in the manufacturing of plastics. It's absolutely an interesting idea. My initial gut reaction to doing something like that is to take a different approach, and that would be the more obvious, better approach, which is to not have more plastics go into the ocean in the first place. Now that's, become a nearly impossible task that, there are many companies and governments and policymakers trying to mitigate the issue of plastics ending up in the ocean. But, I think that I think the difficulty with doing something like that would be trying to identify so it would be very easy to add a chemical to plastics, right? Plastics are made up of hundreds of different types of chemicals. I think what would be difficult about that would be deciding which chemical or which groups of chemicals would do the best at deterring, wildlife from ingesting. And I also would fear that, we might find out that some of those chemicals are leaching out from the plastics into the water and doing damage in other areas. And so I would take probably a more conservative approach to that by trying to mitigate the issue of having plastics end up in the ocean in the first place. So looking in places where there's a higher input of plastics. And so if you think about, how does a piece of plastic, I've got a pen right here, how would something like this end up in the ocean? So if we could kind of just put ourselves in the shoes of this pen, once the ink is run out and it's time to throw it away, how would it actually end up into the ocean? And so if you think about the track of this ending up in the ocean, it would be probably something like mismanagement of the waste. So I would put this in the garbage, and then I would put my garbage into the regular waste bin, and then that waste bin is supposed to be picked up by waste management and taken to a landfill or a sorting or recycling center. Now, let's just say for, the purposes of this conversation, we had a windstorm last night, and for whatever reason, my trash bin, that I had my pen in, ended up tipping over. And now this is just sitting in the environment. There's a rainstorm, and then that rain actually washes this away into, the closest waterway. And then that closest waterway, so I'm out about 10 miles from the coast right now. That closest waterway ends up down towards the ocean. And then lo and behold, through a small, river system, it ends up in the ocean. So my argument would be, let's pay attention to where the highest input of plastics are coming from the land to the ocean. And a river is a perfect example of that. So let's look at rivers and try to see if we can't mitigate some of the plastic that's coming from the land to the ocean. So I guess, the bigger question here of whether or not to add specific chemicals to plastic to deter wildlife from eating, I would defer that to, let's pay attention more and spend time on trying to stop plastics coming from our land to the ocean.
There are also a couple of questions in the chat, and some of them have been answered. I'm going to just quickly answer the one about the fundraising and grant. So this particular project is supported by the federal grant. Thank you, your tax dollars in action. And these are just ongoing, and there are many agencies, federal and private agencies, that offer grants, and they have requirements, and they provide funding for people to do different things. So for this particular grant, we get an offloading of teaching. So we do less teaching so we can spend more time in doing research, but also have some money to buy the supplies that we need to run these kind of experiments. And this is an ongoing process. So researchers, as Professor Baumann and his colleagues know very well, it's usually a full-time job just to get funding to keep research going.
So there's a question about, do chemicals released from degrading plastic move through the food chain? That's a great question. And the answer to that is yes. There are chemicals called persistent organic pollutants, or POPs, that the reason why they're called persistent organic pollutants is because of the reason that they persist in the environment and don't necessarily break down into their individual components. So you can actually trace these persistent organic pollutants through the food chain. That's the short answer to that one. I don't know if anybody else wants to add to that.
No, I think that captured it pretty well, Amelia. There is also an accumulation of the plastic particles themselves up the food web. So you can imagine a shrimp or a krill or a small fish ingesting plastics, and then it gets eaten by a larger fish, and those plastics accumulate within that larger fish, or accumulate with the bird at the top of the food web. And so there is this accumulation of the plastic particles themselves, as well as those pollutants that are associated with the plastics.
So the next question on there is, are the microbes that are sampled native to the area, or do they float along with polyethylene plastics, changing microecosystems that alter food web systems? If so, what could be done about that? That's a great question. Really, really impressed with the questions that you guys are asking. So, I mean, essentially the answer to that is that the microbes that are sampled can be native to the area, but if they have floated along, around in different areas of the ocean, there are what are called hitchhikers, so microorganisms that would colonize a piece of plastic from one area of the ocean and continue to live on that piece of plastic and end up in another area of the ocean and not necessarily be native to that area. I think that one of the biggest questions that's being asked out there right now by researchers is, how are these microorganisms that are coming from different areas, or plastic itself, changing the ecosystem of the ocean? And so I think that, there's a lot of research on that, but I would say that, initially, if you're going to have something that wasn't there before, AKA a piece of plastic floating in the ocean, the chances of it changing the ecosystem are definitely very high. And it's just, the question is, at what level is that really disrupting the local environment or the local ecosystem? And I don't think we necessarily know the full answer to that yet. In the particular sampling that Anna and Rachel and Jeff and I are working on, the microorganisms that are being captured there are, we're incubating directly off of the pier. And so I would tend to say that the microorganisms that are showing up on those pieces of plastic are much more local, because they're being colonized by the organisms that are, specific to, living around the pier and coastal waters.
We had an interesting question in the chat. I hope it was only semi-serious. Sonia said, do I need to stop eating seafood? And the short answer to that is no. The medium answer is we need to change how we eat seafood. And the, slightly longer professorish, explanation for that is, there are certain choices that are going to be sustainable and certain ones that won't. Depends on the time of year. It depends on how the fishing industry is doing, and it depends on where you live. So that's a very hard question to give a blanket answer to. If you do want to look up more resources on what sustainable seafood looks like where you live, the Monterey Bay Aquarium has a resource called Seafood Watch that will take you through what choices are good in your areas.
And I'll briefly touch on the next question, which is, in the documentary Into the Gyre, there was mention made of gooseneck barnacles that hitchhike on plastics to areas where they are considered invasive. This is a great point. Could you elaborate on the impact such invasive species may have on an ecosystem? And honestly, I'm going to refer back to the last question, which is, are these native species or non-native species? We don't necessarily know the impact of invasive species showing up from one place to another, based on transport on plastic. But this is certainly a question that researchers are asking. And another one that's an interesting one is, can, potentially, organisms that could cause sickness, potential pathogens, be another organism that could hitchhike from, one spot in the ocean to another spot in the ocean. And I think that those are really big questions that are trying to be answered right now. And I don't know that we necessarily have, or at least I don't. Maybe somebody else on the team here can speak to it a little bit better, but I don't think we have a very good handle on any of that information quite yet.
I answered a question in the chat about international organizations. And I do want to say that as everything, there is a social aspect to plastic pollution. So unfortunately, many of those pictures that people see about polluted beaches, they tend to be very often in poorer countries that have less regulations and have less policies, to avoid the garbage and the pollution and so on. So the good news is that there are a number of organizations and NGOs trying to work in different countries, different regions, but this is indeed a global issue, and we have to be sensitive to the resources and the conditions of different regions of the world and different countries, what can be done about this.
There's a great question in there for Jeff, which is, what evidence have you seen in terms of oceanic climate change when you're on assignment? I think your background tells a bit of a story to us already.
Yeah. So the background here was actually taken from a Twin Otter flight north of Greenland back in April, as I was coming out from some research in the high Arctic. So that's a really interesting question. And climate change is something that's very difficult to observe over the short periods of time that I've been doing this. And so I'm relatively early in my career. I got my PhD 6 or 7 years ago now. So I have been in the field in some locations for over a decade. But even there, a decade is not much time in terms of changing climate. There's a lot of interannual variability, and there are certain cycles that happen on kind of decadal timescales. And so you do notice trends, but you never want to kind of like lean on it too hard. But the people that are looking kind of across more decadal scales using either local knowledge or ice core records or increasingly actual long-term real observations of things like ocean surface temperature or satellite remote sensing of ice cover, things like this, really are showing increasingly how much change is happening kind of on local scales. One place that I've worked a lot is Utqiagvik in northern Alaska. This is the city that was formerly known as Barrow. They reverted back to the indigenous name there. And the changes in terms of the seasonality is just shocking. Even on the few years that I've been working up there. And again, it's not something you want to lean on too hard as, oh, this is a climate change effect. Because again, there are decadal scales and it can shift back in the short term. But the warm weather that you get there in, say, April or May, which is very much still in the springtime there, is really shocking compared to what we were experiencing 10, 12 years ago. Well, when did I first start going up there? Longer than that now, even. We'll say 10 or 12 years ago when I was first going up there. So the differences are pretty profound, but you need to look beyond personal experience to really kind of get a grip on it.
Someone just asked what percentage of your on-site research intercepts with environmental law, or are there common legality issues that come up? Well, there's one very funny anecdote from when we first started this project. Before we had teamed up with Jeff, we were incubating plastic samples off of buoys. And even though we had a little placard there saying that this is for research purposes, please don't remove it, we did have some do-gooders come along every once in a while and clean up our project. So all those samples were lost. As for more direct legal connotations, there are different rules in place for different types of ships on what sort of waste you can dump out in the ocean. And that's getting into maritime law and getting into military regulation versus other, which can get kind of complex. Chris just asked, is there anything being done on a large scale to clean the plastic from the ocean? Amelia, would you like to explain why we can't just clean it up?
You bet. Yeah, so there are some efforts right now. One of them that I'm thinking of off the top of my head is the Ocean Cleanup Project. And, you know, this is, it seems, so you guys watched Into the Gyre, right? Did this team watch Into the Gyre, this class? Yes, okay. So the reason why you can't just clean it up is because it's those tiny little shards of plastic, right? They're very, very small, smaller than the size of my pinky nail, and they're scattered everywhere. And one reference that I like to make is if you think about smog, you know, there have been third world countries and also first world countries that have had a ton of issues with smog, right? This is pollution that's coming, you know, from the land and making its way into the atmosphere in little tiny particles. And I liken the plastic that's in the ocean to smog in the air because, you know, if we could just clean up the smog in the air, we would have some technology or some way to do that. But unfortunately, because those pieces are so small, those little particles of pollution are so small, you can't just clean it up. So you can kind of think about plastic particles in the ocean like smog. They're everywhere, they're constantly changing because of the environment, the local environment that's happening. And you know, another way to think about it is if we put a net in the water in one particular small area of the ocean, you're going to pick up all of the rest of the normal flora and fauna that are there as well. And that can be very detrimental, as you can imagine, to that local ecosystem. And so unfortunately, you know, it would be a much better story if there was a physical plastic island out there, because then we would be able to either have some real estate beyond that island, you know, some millionaire would buy a plastic island and build a house on it, or we'd take that island and slowly chop it up and bring it back to shore and get rid of it properly. But the reality is that it is not like that. It's little tiny pieces of plastic like smog throughout all of our oceans.
Thank you, Amelia. We are going to have one or more questions because we are kind of watching the time. So Samantha had a questions about how do these new bags, I assume you are talking those more resilient 10-cent bags in the store. So how do they compare to these typical grocery bags in the recycling? Do they float? What their characteristics are? So is there any analysis about how do they compare to the more traditional grocery bags?
You want me to take that one? So I would say that, you know, the idea of, there was another question that was asked about bag bans. So I'll just back up just a little bit. And whether or not those have had an effect on, you know, our, I guess, you know, plastic pollution in our environment. I would say the biggest effect that's come from that really is awareness of people understanding, you know, their use of a single-use plastic item. And that awareness is huge, right? It allows somebody to think on a daily basis about how much plastic they're using and whether or not, you know, it's a single-use item or not. I would say with the plastic bags that are a little bit thicker and reusable, you know, the thinner plastic bags were also reusable, but maybe not to the level of the thicker plastic bags. I like to think about my plastic usage, my personal plastic usage as trying never to have a single-use item And so, you know, if you have a plastic bag and you use it twice, it's no longer single use. And that makes the, you know, the lifetime of that bag last double of what a single use item would be. And so the thicker plastic bags can be reused time and time and time again, probably are more durable than the thinner ones. But I think the main point there is really the take home message from that question would be try not to have a single use plastic go through your hands, and try in some way, shape or form to reuse it a second time to give it a longer life.
Thank you, Amelia. There are some more questions and actually answers. Thank you, Matt, for adding your comment. So Phil, we are going to pivot now to the more like career and science in general oriented questions, but feel free to keep asking questions in the chat. We'll be monitoring the questions and either we answer them here and now, or we'll get back to you and we'll send them later. So with this, I'm passing it to Rachel with a few questions to the panelists.
So we also, during this webinar, wanted to give you all an idea of what it means to work in science professionally, to talk about the science skills we've acquired and how they work in our careers. So just a few questions to get a slice of life of being a scientist. So the first question we have is this where you thought you'd end up career-wise? And our panelists, Matt and Jeff, are going to answer that for us.
I'll get started. So this is more or less where I wanted to end up, but end isn't quite really the word I would use, just because I more or less see myself on a pathway or a trajectory that I'm always continuing to try and go towards. I always keep this idea that I have a 30-year plan in mind, that I try and keep this goal in mind whenever I'm struggling or needing to do something, that I just keep working towards it. But there isn't really a terminal path, but this is the perfect path for me that I felt that I could end up at. I don't think I could have been any luckier and ended up in where I am now. And where I continue to go from here, as long as I keep that goal in mind and don't give up, that's kind of, and stay curious and persistent in what I'm trying to do, I have no doubt that I will feel like I've ended up somewhere that I should have.
Great, thank you, Matt. Jeff, is this where you thought you'd end up?
Similar to Matt's response, I'm very happy with where I've ended up, but it's not necessarily where I thought I would end up for much of my life. And just to elaborate on, I'll take the liberty of elaborating a little bit on Matt's response, and just to highlight that the importance of kind of persistence in terms of pursuing the thing that you are interested in pursuing. So I think Matt was probably started bothering me on email probably a couple of years before he got into the master's program at Scripps. And he'd been out of school for a little while and was kind of exploring ways to get back in. And I asked him to do some remedial coursework and kind of show that he was ready to jump back into academia. And he did those things, and now he's here in the master's program, and kind of it's kind of highlights the need to, if you put the time into it, you can get to where you want to get to. My own experience, I think, is maybe not dissimilar from that. I didn't know what I wanted to do after high school. Wasn't really into going to college. Kind of veered sideways into the military for a while. That worked out great, but I kind of got bored with it after a bit. By the time I was done with that, I felt more interested in going back to college. And once I found myself in that environment, I kind of was surprised to find that I actually really liked that environment and started thinking about going to grad school. But I wasn't really thinking seriously about going to grad school until I was in my almost mid-20s. And once I got into the grad school environment, then I really fell in love with the whole, doing research and being creative, and in some regards, the competitive aspect of it. It's really quite a exciting environment to be in. And things progressed very quickly from there in terms of moving through postdoctoral positions and then finally into a faculty position here at UC San Diego. So I'm very excited to be here, but this is, there's a lot of serendipity involved in that process. And it was definitely not a linear process of getting to this point.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jeff. One theme that comes up again and again when we run these webinars is you got to be open to opportunities, because networking contacts, you just have no idea what's down the road. So, I mean, career planning is an excellent thing to try to do, but you know, sometimes you just never know where the road's going to take you. Our next question for panelists is, what were the biggest influences behind getting to where you've got? And Abhishek, would you mind answering that one for us?
Yeah, sure. I'm very happy to answer these questions, because this is where I acknowledge my teachers all throughout my life, starting from my high school to my colleges and my PhD supervisor and even my postdoctoral supervisor. So I was guided pretty well, like from the starting of my career. And to add, my parents were also a very good teacher. Like, they guided me a lot and they supported me a lot throughout my career. Like, and just to add, like, I started off with being an engineer. I cracked a lot of exams. I got into an engineering course. I did bachelor's in engineering and then master's in engineering. But I was feeling some kind of void at some point of time, and I went to different professors back then, and I wanted, like, I was more interested in science rather than technology, because while I was studying science, I was taught a lot of different things, starting from process engineering to different other stuffs. But I was always intrigued by the science that was going behind it. And since I was in a bioengineering course, and I saw that there is a lot of possibilities that might be there in the field of biotechnology. And then I finally found my fascination in microbes. I think they are one of the greatest things that happened in our geologic evolution, or even our earth evolution. So the life started from there, and I was really intrigued by the possibility of studying them. And there were different particular courses during my early career, might be in bachelor's or my master's, which influenced me a lot, like to know more about it. Just like this one, like this course, this will help a lot of people to think about like what might be there in future, what they will know much more about plastics and microbes. So some of the courses that helped me a lot, influenced me a lot to be what I am today. And the greatest support was from my parents. Like, they helped me to always follow my dreams. Like, they supported me all throughout, like even changing a career from engineering to science. That was a big leap, because I didn't have a big job, and I left that job and pursued a career in science. And I do not regret any of my decisions. So one thing I learned from my career path is that following dreams, like, you will never regret. Like, wherever you end up, like, you will never regret, because it was your choice and you did it. And so I'm pretty happy where I am. And in one line, the teachers were the biggest influence in my career path.
Thank you, Abhishek. If I can add to that, one thing that was really a huge influence for me getting to my current position is I have always been working in something tangentially related to this particular goal. And I mean, I started working in biotech when I was 17 years old. I got a job mopping floors. But you know, if you prove yourself there, you can keep getting advanced. Like, within 2 years working for the exact same company, I went from mopping floors to running a $200,000 instrument. You know, you just never know what opportunities are going to be there. And I would say it never hurts to be humble and start a little lower than you think you're worth. If you think that there will be opportunities there to grow. Okay, one of our next questions here is, what do you wish you had known that you know now? Ken, would you like to answer that for us?
Sure, I would be happy to. I sat down and I just made a couple of comments about what I'd like to express. So I think that students should realize that learning should be a systematic process, and we should be patient. I know in college, for example, we're in a hurry to get to our destination. So my advice is don't rush the process and jump ahead. Go step by step, because learning builds on skills that we obtain from one class to the other. And it's actually interesting because just now, Rachel just mentioned that starting at one process, mopping the floors, allowed her to get to the next step. Patience takes you systematically to the next level, and I think that's important. The other point I would like to mention is always analyze your experiences. That includes your successes and your failures. The best experiments in science, as most of us know, are the ones that we fail at. But through this introspective process, we can fine-tune our interests and our beliefs. And in the end, I believe that our experiences allow us to be our own best teachers. And finally, I would like to just tell you, I was listening to a podcast one time. They were interviewing a scientist. They asked the scientist, what was the best discovery that you made? And he said, well, I've made lots of little discoveries as a scientist, but my best discovery was to realize that I was able to succeed to the level where I'm at. That really resonated with me. So I would like to just tell you that me personally, I'm always looking for my big discovery in science, my white whale, like Moby Dick. But sometimes I have to just stop and realize that those 2 points that I told you, being patient, learning systematically, and realizing that our experiences are our own best teacher, I think that has been one of my biggest discoveries so far.
Very cool, Ken. Anna, would you like to answer that question?
What the question was, I'm sorry, I was looking at somewhere else. I was multitasking.
What do you wish you had known that you know now?
Two things. One is a very small thing, but very important. I would have learned more about data sciences and computer science and coding. I wish I had learned that when I still had the brain capacity. I feel I'm too old for that, but it would have been very useful. But big time, it's kind of what others have said before about following your dreams, because I also had parents who wanted me to go in a certain way, like they wanted me to be a medical doctor, whatever. And for a long time, I was kind of following that path, that I was going somewhere. And it was kind of late when I realized that I wanted to do what I really wanted to do, what I enjoyed, which was teaching and just doing just exploring what I really feel strongly about. And I'm where I wanted to be now, but I wish I had done it, 10 years earlier. So, the younger one is, the easier is to take these risks. But I think that if you follow what the universe is telling you, follow your passions, that is leading you to the right place.
Absolutely. So our final panel question for the day is, how can lab and science skills prepare you for jobs outside of science? And Jesse and Jeff, would you like to take that?
Yeah. So I thought of a couple ways that things that I learned in science can be directly transferable to outside jobs or just life. And the first is science literacy and critical thinking. And that helps you with whether you're consuming information or in another workplace as well. It doesn't have to just be analyzing a science experiment. You think critically about everything that's presented to you. The second is technical writing. So a lot of people don't realize that a lot of science is writing, and you become a clear, concise writer, and that transfers to any discipline really. Organization and data keeping is another thing that's valued in many, many jobs, and then also data analysis. And so I analyze a lot of microbial data, but I could use the coding skills that I have or my data organization and apply it to lots of different fields.
So that was a great answer from Jesse. So there's not a ton that I can add there, but just to kind of re-hit a couple of points. And one would be that critical thinking point. I mean, science really teaches you to think critically. That's what experimental science is essentially doing. It's formalizing that process of critical thinking, identifying a question and coming up with a rigorous way of testing a hypothesis, and then modifying your understanding of the system or your model based on the outcome of that experiment. So you can take that framework and you can apply it, anywhere in life, whether you're working in retail or whether you're working in industry or whatever it may be. It's just a useful way of viewing the world. Beyond that, Jesse really hit it with the technical writing and the coding skills. We live in this data-driven world where streams of data are coming in from all angles, and having a useful way of either yourself working with those data, so having some basic understanding of how to work with and manipulate data and understand the world through data. But even if you don't get to that level with it, just having enough of an understanding so that the people that are working with those data aren't a mystery to you. So you can imagine that you're a manager and you have people underneath you that are working with data, and your job is to interpret their findings for some process in the industry that you're working in. Even if you're not working hands-on with the data yourself, if you understand what they're doing and how they're doing it, then you'll be more effective at your job. And so science is one way of developing those skills, usually in a kind of more fun and interesting setting than working in some kind of other field.
Those are such great points, Jeff. I do data analysis for a lot of colleagues, and it is so important for that colleague to be able to tell me what their central question is, because if you don't know that, you don't know how to collect the data, you don't know how to, analyze and interpret it. And also the science writing skills that you two both mentioned. Technical writing is so huge right now. Being able to write clearly, concisely, and just explain what's going on will get you so far in so many different fields, even if it's just an email.
And I want to add that you notice in the industry, and of course we're going to talk more in the breakout room, but really there are all these skills that are afterthought that like people should know how to do spreadsheets and Excel sheets and just be able to manage data in all kinds of jobs, and actually entry-level jobs sometimes. So all these, how to manipulate or how to use manipulate was a wrong choice. How to use and analyze numbers, it's important for almost all careers. Are we ready for the breakout rooms? Okay, so I'm going to open 3 breakout rooms, and they have the names. So one is Research at National. So I'm going to ask Andrea, Allison, and Rachel to please go there. I may join you, but I will stay behind in case something is going on. The second one is Biotech Careers. So I'll be asking Amelia and Ken and Jesse. No, not Jesse, Matt, to go there, please. And then we have the Scripps Research breakout room. So the Scripps people, please go there if you want to learn more about the kind of research they are doing and so on. So I'm not going to assign anybody, so you'll be able to choose which room you are going, and this is going to be a 10-minute activity. So I'm opening the rooms, and you should be able to just join those 3 rooms that are present. And I'm going to pause the recording for a moment. Okay, I remember to start the recording again. So welcome everybody. I hope you had a good discussions in your breakout rooms. So we are going to wrap up quickly, and I believe we have one more whiteboard poll. So I pass it on to Rachel.
Okay, so our last whiteboard poll, just to sort of wrap up here, is what is one word you would use to describe ocean plastic pollution? And again, same controls as last time. If the controls aren't working for you, feel free to type it out in the text as well.
Are saying terrible, scary in the chat.
Dangerous, unfortunate.
Disgraceful.
Stepchild.
Whoever wrote fixable, thank you, because I was getting really sad reading all the other words.
Yes,
so yes,
Welcome.
we have to fix
Yeah.
it.
All right, anybody else? Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and sharing your time this Saturday. I hope you found this useful. Kurt's got something to say.
Rachel, can I talk about the focus group?
Absolutely.
Please.
Thanks. Okay, as part of the external evaluation, we would like to talk to you about your experiences relative to the ocean plastic research. And so I'm going to put a link in the chat there. It's also in the Padlet, where you can sign up for a group discussion. We have a series of questions, and we want to ask you about the activities and the impact on you of the ocean plastics part of this course. It is a discussion. It is completely anonymous. So we will take a bunch of notes. We will write back a report to National University for them to see it, but no names are ever attached in the reports. And we actually go to the point of saying the students said. We don't even use the words he and she anymore, so that there's no attribution of individuals. So the sign up, the focus groups will begin on Thursday and run into next week. So I'll put the link in the chat, but it's also on the Padlet. So please sign up, and we'll see you sometime in the future. Thanks.
So you'll also get a link for a survey as well, which is also super useful for us to get your feedback.
So yes. This is the way, just so that everybody that's on the call here knows, this is the way that we get our grant funded again. So good feedback, bad feedback, but feedback is what we need.
So about the survey, this is something that's going to come directly to your email, and I think it will start so it's going to come to you tomorrow, and you may get to reminder. It's a very short survey. It's one of those Likert one, you know, agree, disagree, etc. This is also anonymous. So in order for you to get the extra credit points, and we are going to send this also via email, but you want to take a picture of your submission screens that you submitted the survey and send it to your professor, okay? Because otherwise we have no way to know that you completed the survey. So again, there are two opportunities for extra credit. One is the survey, which is really quick, and the other is signing up for focus groups. And again, it's anonymous, so your professor only is going to know you participated or you didn't, but not, or you participated, but not what you said or what your answers were.
Exactly.
So I wanted to think, yes, there was a question about sending it an email. So this will be recorded, so you can actually watch it again if you want. But with the recording, we are going to send all the information of the links and the surveys and so on. So I don't know if there are any final questions or comments.
I put this question in the chat, but nobody touched on it. You've mentioned a lot about talking about the grant money, and we need to do these surveys which helps you get grant money. But what it seems that a lot to do with any kind of scientific research is it's the most important thing is having money to go towards it, right? So I sent Dr. Baral a question in an email talking about how can we convince people that we know, our family and friends, to vote for politicians that will put in policies to send and funnel money towards these projects. Because I've been personally unsuccessful in convincing some of my own family members that science is important and climate change and pollution is an issue. So I was wondering if someone could speak a little bit more to that.
Thank you for reminding me about that question. You know, there were so many questions that I had yours at hand. I think, and that's part of something I like to do on the side, which is science communication. And I think what works with humans is to look for common ground. So very often scientists will try to kind of talk down to people like this is what it is. And that usually pushes people back, you know, like, who are you to say that? But pretty much everybody agrees that eating plastic and fish is not a good idea. Nobody likes to have beaches full of garbage. Most people will get, you know, this impression of seeing animals suffering and dying. So I think it's about, okay, what is important, trying your audience, what is important to them, something that you can do common ground, and then go from there. Like, okay, if we support these policies, that's going to mean that we are going to have a cleaner beach, that we are going to, you know, have less animal suffering, that our food is going to be, or the water is going to be safer. So that's my recommendation, but this is a huge challenge that we have. And part of what we are doing here is to, you know, spread the word. You know, you can talk to your families and your colleagues, your friends about, hey, I just learned all this stuff, and maybe they will change a little bit their mind about that.
So I'll just add a couple comments to that. So, you know, you were in the breakout session for the Scripps research with us. I think you're well equipped now to think about some different ways that science impacts industry and economy. It's good economics to put money into science. We train people, we train the scientists and engineers that go back out into industry and make industry operate better and expand in productive and sustainable ways. And there are very few people that don't respond to an economic argument in terms of in favor of science. And it's worth noting that science is actually a fairly bipartisan issue. And I mean, it does get thrown around a lot in certain circles, but when you actually look at the policy and the funding that goes towards science, there's very strong bipartisan support for the science, because it's widely understood that you need people with advanced degrees to go back into industry, to optimize processes, to grow industry, to come up with new ways of doing things. The science infrastructure itself is largely a flow-through process for money going back into industry. If I get a grant, most of that grant goes to Amelia's company, Thermo Fisher, to buy supplies, or it goes towards personnel and salaries. It's actually a very fast way of money working its way back into industry and back into economies. And so it's actually a very efficient use of federal and state funds. It does a lot for the economy, both in the short term through money getting back out there, but also in the long term in terms of advancing the workforce and workforce development.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm really very encouraged by your great questions and comments from this group. This is very make us happy, and I again spread the word, and we'll keep doing this. Okay. Well, if there is nothing else, I thank you again for being here. And again, this will be posted, the recording and all the information that you learn here about the surveys and the focus group and so on. So
Thank you to our panelists and thank you to our audience.
thank you everybody for coming, and you have a wonderful weekend. Take care.